African Media Initiative's business blog discusses topics pertinent to media business on the African continent with business leaders and thought leaders to look at trends, identify opportunities, and examine possible solutions to the many challenges facing media organizations as they try to navigate today's rapidly changing media landscape.
Jim Kim's commitment that the international community will lead to, get the poverty rate, that's the percentage of people living on $1.25 a day, down to 3% by 2030. And I think the question is, what is it going to take? And I have a particular view, which I've written up on my blog several times, which is that, or another way to ask the question is, what's stopping us from getting to 3% poverty? And most of it, if you look closely, is a series of what you might call low-level political equilibrium. And for instance, we have, as you know, living in Nairobi, you have lots of problems with infrastructure. Roads, poor quality roads, power blackouts, water shortages, and so on. And if you dig a little bit deeper, and I'll give you the example of roads, what you find is that the problem is not simply the lack of roads. It's actually a political problem where there are special interests that vested interests that have an interest in keeping the roads in poor quality. Mainly because in Africa, for the large major road routes, there's a guaranteed monopoly for the trucking industry. And so the trucking industry actually is able to prohibit entry and charge very high prices, and that's what contributes to the high cost of exporting goods from Africa. But you can't break this because the trucking monopoly is very powerful, and in some cases closely associated, shall we say, with the political leadership. Now, this is where the media comes in, because it's not something that the World Bank can go in there and, we can go in there and advise them to deregulate the trucking industry, but they're not going to do it unless they see that there's political pressure coming from below to do that. And so the media can actually play an important role in just simply providing the evidence, showing the evidence to the people that it's the profits of the trucking industry that is actually standing in the way of reducing transport costs in Africa. So I think if you look at you really ask the question, what will it take to end poverty in Africa? It's got to be overcoming these government failures, or these breaking out of these low-level political equilibria. And the media is an incredibly important and powerful role, has an incredibly important and powerful role to play, because they are the ones who can actually inform the public, the majority of whom can stand to benefit from these reforms, inform them of those reforms and the benefits of them. First thing is to keep very clear in one's mind that China is an investor in Africa. It is not a donor to Africa. They do give some aid, but primarily we have to think of China as investing in Africa, which is perfectly fine because they want to make money. But Africa also can make money by those investments. But the critical thing there, in my view, is to make, just like with other investors, just like General Electric invests in Africa or Siemens invests in Africa, it's to make sure that the investment contract, is one that is fair and to the benefit of the Africans. Because too often what you end up with is a situation where the bargaining power is asymmetric. You've got some very powerful, like in the case of multinationals as well, you've got a team of very skilled lawyers negotiating on one side, and you might have a a permanent secretary with not much other support negotiating on the other side. And as a result, the contract can be very asymmetric. So I think the critical thing in making the best out of China's investment in Africa, which I think is welcomed by everybody, is to make sure that the way the contract is structured, there it is in the benefit to the benefit and maximizes the benefit to the African people. I mean, I think the private equity is coming in, but as you said, it's the smallest of the different flows, and that's partly because capital markets in Africa are still quite thin, and so it's if you come in as an investor, you don't have that much protection with other capital markets and the regulatory incentives out there. So I think
that from the point of view of media organizations, I don't think they should only rely on private equity for capital, that there are other sources of capital, including domestic capital, that they should be able to tap into.